All right, I have many gripes with this camera, the Blackmagic Studio 4K Pro. And what makes matters worse is I was actually very excited when this camera was released because it had pretty much everything I wanted in a camera, which was SDI out 12G, SDI in for camera control, Ethernet out seemed interesting to me, XLR ins for high quality audio recording, USB-C for video recording so you can record directly to an external SSD, fantastic. And then finally, tally and comms. So these cameras have an internal communication system if you use the ATEM. It just honestly seemed like a perfect multi-camera solution, especially when you consider the price, $1,795. But here's the thing. There's a reason it costs $1,795. So let's talk about my gripes. I'll start off strong with my biggest gripe, which is the colors. The colors just don't hold up compared to other cameras. So right now I'm shooting this video with my Sony FX6, and right next to it, I have a Blackmagic Studio 4K. Now, obviously these are very different lenses and they're completely different cameras, but we'll start off with this comparison so you can see how they differ from one another. But most importantly, this camera does not match other Blackmagic cameras, which is a problem, especially when we're working with multicam. So when I work with Blackmagic cameras, the setup we have is 4 of these Blackmagic 4.6K G2, Blackmagic Micro 4K, the small GoPro looking ones, they're discontinued now, and the most modern edition, these. And these cameras are harder to color match than the Blackmagic Micro 4Ks, which are, I don't remember how old, I'll put it on the screen right now. Anyways, enough of me talking about it, let me show you some footage. Right now on the screen, I'm putting the URSA Mini with a white balance of 5600. This is an accurate image, and I can tell you that my sweater is actually that color in real life. Now here's the Studio 4K. Not only does it have this strange greenish hue, but my sweater is just simply a completely different color. Now that weird green hue, that is fixable using Blackmagic's ATEM CCU control. But the red, that's just a different color. In order to fix that, I need to bring that footage into DaVinci and use the hue v-hue color curves. Just for comparison, here's a LUT I made for a tungsten environment. The concert halls that we work at tend to have tungsten lighting, and so I made a LUT for that. It's not perfect, but it does bring this camera a little bit closer to URSA's in that environment. Now, perhaps you might be thinking, John, you are over-exaggerating, you can just fix it in post. And usually I would tend to agree with you, even though I don't like that mentality. But here's the thing, this is a live production camera. We use these for live streaming, which means that the color should be good out of camera so that we can go live without needing to do any post-production. That color makes it nearly impossible to use these cameras, especially when you're using them with other Blackmagic products. So that's my biggest gripe, but I'm not done. Next, ISO color shifts. Oh yeah, there are more color problems. You thought I was done with the color thing. No, there's more color problems. So these cameras have dual native ISO, which is fantastic. Great, I love that. Much better than its predecessor, which had noise problems. Now the noise is much better in this new sensor, I will say, when Blackmagic gets it right. But the issue lies when you change between the two ISOs. Let me show you some footage. This is the camera set to 8 dB of gain. Looks fine. Now I'm gonna swap it to 10 dB. That's where the change occurs. Notice how much more green there is in the image. For the sake of comparison, these are the images exposure adjusted, and I'm swiping between the two. The sensitive native ISO introduces a lot more green into the image. But what's most curious about this is that when I was running these tests originally, I recorded in camera. And in camera, this is not a problem. This is just a problem when you output via the SDI port. So here's the footage that I recorded in camera. Once again, we're at 8 dB of gain, and now we're transitioning to 10 dB. In camera, it has this like 3 frames of a darker image, which is sort of weird, but the actual color between 8 dB and 10 dB is not different. It's only different through the SDI, which once again is a problem because this is a production camera used in a multicam environment. So if you can't trust that the SDI out is consistent with the internal recording of the camera, that means that you're gonna run into issues not only with not being able to trust the color science through the SDI port, but when you do inevitably do post-production, you can't just slap the LUT on it and expect it to look the same, because it's gonna be different. So all of a sudden, you have to start editing around that, and it just adds more and more hours of work. So at the top of this video, I mentioned that these cameras can record internally, which was a step up from its predecessor. That being said, it's not like Blackmagic gives you a whole lot of options. So that's my next gripe: recording formats. The only recording formats that Blackmagic provides you in these cameras is Blackmagic RAW, 4K. You can't even crop into the sensor. Which, by the way, cropping into the sensor with a Micro Four Thirds camera would have been pretty cool, because you can get a lot more reach, which is great for a live streaming environment to be able to crop in and out of the sensor. Gee, wouldn't that have been nice? You can output in 1080p. It's just a little bit hidden in the menus. It's just annoying that you have to set up your cameras differently. These we would set up 1080p recording, and the SDI is just automatic. These we have to record in 4K, which is just more data. And then we have to downscale the resolution on the SDI output. At least this detail doesn't greatly affect the multi-camera live production environment, but it is annoying when you have to bring it into post and you do corrections for like the final product, and then you have to rescale everything. And on top of that, the color doesn't match, right? So not only do you have to rescale everything, but you also have to sort of color adjust everything. It's a pain. My last gripe is with the Ethernet workflow. Now, I haven't actually used it, so you might think, how can you have a gripe with it if you haven't used the Ethernet workflow? Well, let me tell you. My issue with it is that these cameras used to have a fiber in, which was fantastic for the workflow that we use, which is just optical fiber on the other end, and you can cover great distances, and it's fairly cheap. Now Blackmagic says, well, optical fiber is actually pretty expensive. Ethernet is much cheaper. Let's go with Ethernet. It's better for you. But that's not exactly true, is it? This is the cost of 250 feet of Ethernet cable. Now this is the cost of 250 feet of optical fiber. So, you know, at first glance, you might say, hey, yeah, Ethernet is much cheaper. But in order to have that cheaper Ethernet workflow, you just need to buy a Blackmagic Studio converter, retailing at $955. And by the way, when I first saw this product, I was excited because I thought, these cameras, they don't record ProRes, so at least you can have power over Ethernet, plug the camera in, and then have all these recording modules that you can record ProRes to an SD. Nope, it's just a conversion. It's just conversion for $955. So if you actually do the math, it's not really cheaper than fiber converters. It has some benefits, but it just, they were so close. Like, how great would that have been to have this Blackmagic Studio converter that also has an SD card in and you can record to ProRes? That would have made it all better. I would have understood. These cameras are cheap. They're trying to, make them as cheap as possible so people can buy cameras for multicam environments. You want a little bit of an upgrade? Here's the Blackmagic Studio converter. An extra $1,000, but you get some extra features. But no, at the end of the day, it's just an expensive converter. And if you do the math, the Ethernet workflow is not actually cheaper than the optical fiber. And what makes matters worse, the reason why I'm so frustrated and I'm making this whole rant to begin with, is that Blackmagic makes great products. And Blackmagic is the king of multicam production environments. So seeing them put out a product like this that is just not up to speed to a professional working environment, it makes me a little bit sad. Blackmagic Design makes fantastic cameras. This is just not one of them. Anyways, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me rant for however long this video ended up being. If you've made it this far, I would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.